Her hand touched mine, and suddenly I knew everything. The secrets of the universe flooded into my mind like a dam breaking. She whispered, "Please come with me." And my entire reality shifted. I was just a maintenance worker hiding in cathedral ruins, and now I'm seeing stars being born and dying in the span of a heartbeat. The air tasted like ash and ozone. Dust motes danced in the beams of light cutting through what remained of the cathedral's shattered stained glass. Ethan pressed himself against the cold marble of a fallen saint statue, his maintenance overalls smeared with soot and debris. Outside, the world kept burning. He wasn't a soldier. Never wanted to be. His job was fixing atmospheric processors, not hiding from them. But New Geneva had become a different city in the last 6 months. The familiar hum of city infrastructure had been replaced by the percussive thump of distant explosions and the chatter of pulse rifles. He'd been trying to reach the eastern sector maintenance tunnels when the shelling started. The cathedral was just supposed to be cover. Then he saw her, moving through the wreckage like the destruction was a gentle slope. She stepped over fallen beams and around scattered rubble with a grace that didn't make sense. The fires didn't touch her. The smoke seemed to part. She was a clean line cutting through the chaos. She was tall, almost too tall. Her skin held its own soft light, pale like moonlight on water. Those eyes, green like deep ocean trenches, scanned the ruins until they settled on him. Her ears tapered to delicate points that caught the flickering firelight. She didn't rush, didn't call out, just moved toward him with a calmness that felt alien in that place. Every other person he'd seen in weeks moved either in panic or aggression. This was different, purposeful, quiet. When she reached him, she didn't speak, didn't gesture, just extended her hand, palm up. Her fingers were long, slender. Ethan should have pulled back, should have run. But something in her stillness held him there. Her skin touched his. Cool at first, then burning. The surge hit him like a live wire to the spine. His vision whited out, then exploded into color and motion. Nebulas bloomed behind his eyes. Solar systems spun into being and died in microseconds. He felt the birth of stars as physical pressure in his chest, the heat of supernovas, the chill of deep space. It wasn't seeing, it was knowing, understanding the fabric of reality in a single, overwhelming download. Then her voice cut through the cosmic noise. Soft, clear. "Please come with me." The connection broke. His hand fell away. The cathedral ruins snapped back into focus around them. But nothing would ever be the same. That touch had rewired him, opened a door he didn't know existed. He looked at his hand, looked at her. The choice was already made. They moved through the shattered remains of the nave, stepping over broken pews and crushed marble. Ethan's hand still tingled where she'd touched him. The feeling was slowly fading from cosmic overload to something more like a mild electric buzz. He flexed his fingers, watching her move ahead of him with that same impossible grace. "You know," he said, his voice rough from dust and disuse. "Most people start with introductions before moving on to the hand-holding phase." The words came out before he could stop them. A weak joke, defense mechanism kicking in. He'd been making bad jokes since basic training. Soldiers either laughed or told him to shut up. She paused by a collapsed archway, her head tilting. The gesture was alien, but readable, curious. "Your people use words first," she said. Her voice had that same calm quality as her movement. "No hurry. We find touch more honest." Ethan stopped walking. "Honest how?" "Words can lie, can be shaped. Skin contact transmits truth directly." She held up her hand, palm outward. "Biochemical signals, emotional resonance, neural patterns. Your species has this capability too, though you've largely forgotten how to read it." He thought about all the conversations he'd had that week. The military briefings full of confident lies. The propaganda announcements crackling over ruined speakers. The promises from officers that turned out to be empty. Words were cheap, easy to weaponize. "This is how you communicate?" he asked. "Just touch?" Not just communication, she said. Understanding. Connection. We build relationships through physical contact, not verbal negotiation. It requires vulnerability, trust. You cannot hide your true self when you open yourself this way. The distant thump of artillery sounded almost musical suddenly, like percussion in some strange symphony. The war noise was fading as they moved further from the cathedral's ruins, or maybe he was just hearing it differently now. He looked at his own hands, calloused from maintenance work, stained with grease that wouldn't wash out. Human hands that had mostly known tools and machinery, not other people. The last time he'd held someone's hand he couldn't remember. His training had taught him to maintain distance, watch for threats, keep your weapon ready, trust no one until they've been vetted. This was the opposite. This was opening yourself completely to a stranger. While humanity built better walls, her people built better connections. While we developed more advanced weapons, they developed more intimate ways of understanding each other. The contrast was so stark it almost hurt to think about. She watched him process this. Those ocean green eyes didn't blink often. There was no judgment in her gaze, just patience. Like she'd done this before. Like she understood how much his worldview was cracking apart. The maintenance worker from New Geneva meeting a being who saw physical contact as the highest form of truth. The soldier who'd been taught to shoot first, meeting someone who reached out her hand instead. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 6 months in a war where nobody touched except to hurt, and now here was this person, showing him that touch could be something else entirely. They moved through a gap in the crumbled wall, leaving the cathedral behind. The city spread out before them, smoking and broken, but Ethan was seeing it with new eyes, or feeling it with new skin. They reached a clearing where the city's rubble gave way to scorched earth. No landing pad, no visible craft. Ethan scanned the area, expecting something metallic, something that looked like technology. Instead, the air shimmered like heat rising from pavement in summer. The shape that resolved wasn't metal or composite. It looked more like polished bone grown into elegant curves with subtle pulses of light moving beneath its surface like blood flow. "It's alive?" Ethan asked, his maintenance technician's mind trying to categorize what he was seeing. "Not exactly," she said. "The ship and I share a nervous system." Her hand rested against the surface, which rippled in response. The material wasn't cold metal, but something warmer, with the texture of smooth skin over firm muscle. An opening appeared without seams or visible mechanisms. The interior wasn't what he expected from spacecraft design. No control panels with blinking lights. No switches or joysticks. The walls had a living flexibility, shifting subtly as they entered. The architecture felt grown rather than built, with curves that followed some organic logic his human eyes couldn't quite parse. She gestured toward what might have been a seat. It resembled more of a large soft growth rising from the floor. When Ethan sat, the material adjusted to his body shape like a living cushion, supporting him perfectly. It felt like sitting in the palm of a giant hand that knew exactly how to hold him. "You might want to brace," she said, though there were no straps or restraints. Then they were moving, or the world was moving around them. Ethan's inner ear registered no acceleration, no G-forces pinning him back. The sensation was entirely wrong. One moment they were on the ground, the next they were climbing through atmosphere without any sense of motion. His stomach didn't lurch. His head didn't spin. It felt like the ship was standing still while the universe slid past them. This wasn't engineering as he understood it. Human ships fought physics. They burned fuel to overcome gravity. They had inertial dampeners that only partly worked. This craft seemed to have a different relationship with physical laws altogether. It moved through space without appearing to travel through it, like a thought crossing a mind. He watched her operate the ship. She didn't touch controls. Her hands moved through the air and the ship responded. Panels shifted. Displays shimmered into existence where there had been blank surfaces. The entire vessel felt like an extension of her will, a partnership where human and alien intelligence became co-pilots. Ethan placed his palm flat against the interior wall. He felt a faint vibration, a rhythm like a slow heartbeat. The surface was warm, alive in a way he couldn't define. This wasn't a machine he was riding in. This was a living being, and he was inside it. The realization settled in his stomach. Different from fear, but just as profound. He'd spent his career maintaining machines that fought against nature, pumps that forced atmosphere through filters, engines that battled gravity. This ship worked with the universe instead of against it. The technology was so advanced it felt less like invention and more like discovery, like they'd found a way to cooperate with reality rather than conquer it. The maintenance worker from New Geneva was sitting inside a living spacecraft piloted by an alien woman who communicated through touch. His world had become stranger than any training manual could have prepared him for. The ship didn't move like any craft Ethan recognized. It didn't roar to life or shudder with the strain of engines. The walls simply flexed, the organic panels shifting like muscle tissue. A warm light pulsed through the chamber as they rose, the living surface beneath his feet adjusting to the pressure change. Ethan watched the city drop away through what he assumed was a window, though it felt more like looking through clear skin. The ruined streets became patterns. The burning sectors became flickering brushstrokes. The war that had consumed his life for months now looked like abstract art from this height. Violent, sure. Destructive, absolutely. But from up here it also looked almost decorative. The explosions were tiny blossoms of orange and red. The smoke plumes were delicate gray threads. "It looks different from here," he said, his voice quiet. The alien stood beside him, her hand resting on the living wall. The surface responded to her touch with a soft luminescence. "Altitude grants perspective," she said. "The galaxy is essentially a very large neighborhood. We all have to live together." Ethan glanced at her. "A neighborhood?" "With rules. Noise ordinances. Property lines. Basic courtesy about not burning your neighbor's house down." She said it so matter-of-factly, like interstellar relations were just advanced community management. The simplicity of the metaphor caught him off guard. All the grand concepts of first contact, cosmic civilizations, galactic federations, reduced to municipal codes and homeowner associations. It was almost funny. Humanity had been fighting over scraps while the neighbors were worrying about property values and noise complaints. He watched another explosion bloom silently on the surface. From here it was just a brief flash. No sound, no heat, no screaming. The moral weight of it felt different at this distance. The violence seemed smaller, less significant. More like children fighting in a sandbox than a species-defining conflict. Their conversation shifted as Earth continued to shrink behind them. They weren't talking about survival tactics or immediate threats anymore. They were discussing civilization arcs, developmental trajectories. The alien noted that despite the brutality of human conflict, she'd also observed moments of restraint, soldiers helping wounded enemies, civilians sharing limited resources across battle lines, small acts of curiosity about the world beyond the fighting. That capacity for looking outward, she said, even when surrounded by violence. That's what interests us. Ethan realized he was seeing his own species through entirely new eyes, not as the center of the universe, but as one developing civilization among many, not as heroes or villains in their own story, but as potential neighbors in a much larger community. The shift was dizzying. All the certainties he'd held about good and evil, us and them, right and wrong, they all seemed suddenly provincial, small. The blue marble continued to recede in the viewing membrane, his home becoming just another object in the blackness. He'd never felt so small. He'd never felt so connected to something so large. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft hum of the living ship. Ethan kept watching until Earth was just a speck. Then even the speck vanished into the darkness. The structure appeared on the viewing membrane like a star being born. At first just a pinprick of light, then swelling to fill the entire field of vision. It wasn't a building or a station in any human sense. The nexus pulsed with organic rhythm, its surface flowing and shifting like a living thing thinking. Towers that might have been spires or nerves rose and fell in slow waves. The scale was beyond comprehension, something that shouldn't be possible according to any physics Ethan understood. She stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on the living wall of their ship. "Our greatest achievement," she said, her voice quiet. "And our most sobering responsibility." The ship moved toward the structure without sound or apparent propulsion, just drifted into an opening that formed like a flower blooming in reverse. The interior was all soft light and curved surfaces that breathed. Corridors branched off in directions that made Ethan's eyes hurt to follow. The air tasted different, clean, with a hint of ozone and something else like the smell after lightning strikes. This is where we evaluate emerging species, she continued. Determine readiness for the wider community. Or if necessary, maintain quarantine protocols. Ethan watched the walls shift around them. Patterns flowed through the surfaces like thoughts made visible. He realized the entire structure was conscious, intelligent in a way that made human AI look like counting beads. The scale of intelligence here wasn't just greater than human comprehension, it was of a different category entirely. Like comparing a single neuron to an entire nervous system, the casual way she mentioned evaluation and quarantine. The matter-of-fact tone, this wasn't some new discovery. This was established procedure, centuries of interstellar governance happening right here in this living architecture, patient oversight of developing civilizations. The weight of that responsibility settled on Ethan's shoulders. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. The examination had begun, he understood now. The hand touch in the cathedral, the journey here, the conversation about human nature. It had all been part of the assessment. He wasn't just a refugee being given sanctuary. He was a representative sample. Humanity itself was under the microscope, or whatever passed for a microscope in a living megastructure that probably didn't use lenses. The alien moved toward an archway that formed as she approached. The opening revealed a chamber with soft, shifting surfaces that seemed to adjust to their presence. "They'll want to speak with you," she said. "Just be yourself. That's what they need to see." Ethan followed her into the chamber. The walls pulsed with soft light that seemed to respond to his breathing. He thought about Earth spinning somewhere out there in the black. All those billions of people going about their lives, fighting their wars, loving their families, dreaming their dreams. None of them knowing that their future was being decided right here, right now, in this room that felt more alive than any place he'd ever been. The maintenance worker from New Geneva. The man who'd been fixing air scrubbers 6 months ago, now standing as the accidental ambassador for his entire species. The irony would have been funny if the stakes weren't so terrifyingly high. Every word, every gesture, every thought might be part of the evaluation. He looked at his guide. Her calm presence, the way the living structure seemed to know her, to welcome her. She'd been doing this for a long time, guiding emerging species toward this moment, toward this threshold. He wondered how many times she'd stood where he stood now, how many civilizations she'd watched step into the galactic community, or how many she'd watched fail the test. The chamber continued to shift around them. The air hummed with barely perceptible energy. Ethan took a breath. The air still tasted like lightning, like possibility, like judgment. The chamber walls pulsed with soft light that seemed to breathe in time with Ethan's own heartbeat. He looked around at the organic surfaces, the living architecture that felt both ancient and alert. "So," he said, the words coming out dry, "do I need to bring pencils? Multiple choice or essay questions?" The alien's mouth did something that might have been a smile. "This isn't that kind of test," she said. "Think of it more as a conversation." The light in the room shifted. Patterns flowed across the walls like water. A presence made itself known not through sound or image, but through a feeling in the air, a weight and a tension. The nexus itself was listening. "They see this as a threshold moment for your species," the alien explained. Her voice remained calm, but Ethan noticed she stood a little straighter. The point where civilizations either choose transcendence or self-destruction. There's no middle ground. Ethan absorbed this. No pressure, just the future of humanity hanging in the balance. And what exactly are we supposed to prove? That you're willing to grow, that you can learn from your mistakes. The burden isn't about passing exams. It's about demonstrating capacity for change. He felt the attention focus on him. Not hostile, not friendly, just assessing like a doctor listening to a heartbeat. His bad joke about pencils, the way he'd asked questions instead of making demands. His stubborn refusal to be intimidated even when facing something beyond his comprehension. They were reading all of it. Every hesitation, every glance, every nervous shift of his feet. Humanity thrived on improvisation and conflict. That's what made them so dangerous, so unpredictable. The Nexus beings had to evaluate a species that could invent poetry and genocide in the same century, that could send probes to other planets while burning their own. A people who fought brutal wars but also organized cross-border medical relief. The contradiction was the point. They saw the violence, sure. The capacity for destruction was evident in the burning cities below. But they also saw the glimmers, The soldiers who rescued enemy children, the scientists who shared findings across battle lines, the ordinary people who kept creating art even as the world fell apart, that stubborn spark of something better than survival. The stakes couldn't be higher. One wrong move and humanity gets quarantined. Written off as another failed experiment. But the format felt deliberately human. No sterile examination table. No probes or scanners. Just conversation in a room that felt alive. The assessment wasn't happening through some alien technology. It was happening through the most human of things. Dialogue. Questions and answers. The exchange of ideas. This wasn't about checking boxes on some cosmic evaluation form. It was about understanding who humans were at their core. Not their technology. Not their weapons. Their character. Their potential. The conversation would determine whether humanity got to join the galactic neighborhood or whether they'd be left to solve their own problems. With all the terrible final solutions that implied, Ethan stood a little straighter. The maintenance worker turned accidental ambassador. The man who'd been fixing air scrubbers was now speaking for billions. The irony wasn't lost on him, but neither was the opportunity. However this went, at least humanity would get a fair hearing, a chance to make their case, to show they were more than just the sum of their worst moments, more than just another violent species destined to burn themselves out. The patterns on the walls shifted again, the attention focused. The conversation was about to begin. The light patterns on the walls slowed their flow, settling into a steady rhythm like a calm heartbeat. The decision had been made. Not a verdict, not a sentence. An offer. Humanity would receive guidance, technology, knowledge, but the choice of how to use these gifts would remain with humanity. The Nexus beings refused to force wisdom. They would provide the tools, but humans would have to build their own future. Failure to mature could invite intervention, but only as a last resort. The preference was clear. Empower rather than compel. This wasn't about punishment. It was about providing opportunities for improvement before considering more drastic measures. The approach mirrored restorative justice principles, education and correction over immediate punishment. The alien woman watched Ethan process this. Her expression remained neutral, but there was something new in her posture. A subtle shift in how she held herself. "There's more," she said. Her voice carried a different weight now. "I've been asked to serve as liaison to help guide your people." The arrangement reframed everything. This wasn't a courtroom decision anymore. This was a mentorship, a partnership. The stakes shifted from receiving a verdict to undertaking a cooperative journey. Earth's fate would hinge on human agency, not alien judgment. She would be the bridge, the guide, the person who helped humanity navigate this new reality. Her role blended authority with partnership. She had the knowledge and experience, but the choices would remain human choices. The responsibility would remain human responsibility. Ethan thought about what this meant. No magical solutions, no alien cavalry coming to fix everything, just knowledge, guidance, the chance to learn from someone who'd seen other civilizations through this process, the opportunity to avoid the mistakes that doomed 93% of species. The conditional nature of the offer felt right. It respected human autonomy while providing support. It acknowledged that real change couldn't be forced from outside. It had to come from within. The Nexus could open doors, but humanity would have to walk through them. The alien woman's new role explained so much. Her calm demeanor during the evaluation, her patience with his questions, her willingness to enter a war zone to make contact. She wasn't just an envoy. She was a teacher preparing to take on a new student, a mentor ready to guide a species through its most challenging transition. The relationship shifted from examiner and subject to guide and traveler. From judge and defendant to partners working toward a common goal. The power dynamic changed. This wasn't about superior and inferior. This was about experienced and inexperienced, teacher and student, guide and follower. The conditional path acknowledged humanity's flaws while believing in their potential. It recognized the capacity for growth, the possibility of change. The offer wasn't based on humanity being perfect. It was based on humanity being capable of becoming better. Ethan looked at the woman who'd started as a stranger in a ruined cathedral, who'd become his guide through impossible realities, who now stood as the designated bridge between two civilizations. The weight of her new role showed in her eyes. This wasn't just a job assignment. This was a commitment, a belief that humanity was worth the effort. The living walls pulsed softly around them. The Nexus had made its offer. The conditions were set. The guidance would be provided. The teacher was ready. Now it was humanity's turn to decide what kind of student they would be, whether they would use the knowledge to build or to break, to grow or to destroy. The choice, as always, remained theirs. 6 months ago, he was maintaining atmospheric processors and complaining about cafeteria food. Now he stood as the sole advocate for his entire species before beings whose intelligence dwarfed human comprehension. The man who'd once measured his days by maintenance schedules and coffee breaks now measured them by the future of humanity. The transformation wasn't just about location. It was about identity. The fear that had lived in his gut since the war started had been replaced by something else. A quiet confidence, a sense of responsibility that felt both terrifying and natural. The routine of checking air filters and fixing power couplings seemed like someone else's life. A lifetime ago. A different person. He'd been hiding behind a statue when she found him, trying to make himself small, trying to survive another day in a war he never asked for. Now he stood straight, spoke clearly, made the case for billions of people he'd never meet. The maintenance worker became the diplomat. The survivor became the spokesperson. The man who fixed things became the man who might help fix everything. The journey had changed him. Not just the travel through space. The contact, the connection. That initial hand touch had opened doors in his mind he didn't know existed. The cosmic understanding had faded, but the after effects remained. A new way of seeing. A new way of thinking. The universe felt both larger and more intimate than he'd ever imagined. His relationship with the alien woman defined the transformation. The trust that grew between them. The quiet understanding that developed during their journey. It wasn't romantic in any human sense, but it held a tenderness that felt deeper than friendship. An energy bond that transcended physical attraction. A meeting of minds and purposes that made the cosmic stakes feel personal. Grounded the fate of worlds in the simple reality of two people learning to understand each other. She'd seen something in him. Something worth reaching out to, worth risking contact for, and he'd seen something in her. A being who offered connection instead of conflict, understanding instead of judgment. That mutual recognition became the foundation for everything that followed. The maintenance worker and the alien envoy. Two very different beings finding common ground. He'd become the bridge between worlds. The living connection between humanity and the galactic community. The man who understood both the gritty reality of Earth's conflicts and the cosmic perspective of the Nexus. He could speak the language of both survival and transcendence. Could articulate human fears and alien hopes in terms both sides might understand. The transformation happened gradually. One conversation at a time, one revelation at a time. The scared man in the cathedral ruins didn't vanish. He just grew, expanded, found capacities he never knew he possessed. The confidence came from facing the impossible and not breaking. The responsibility came from understanding what was at stake. He looked at his hands. The same hands that had fixed machinery, that had held tools, that had touched hers and received the universe. They didn't look different, but they felt different. They'd held both wrench and cosmic understanding. They'd repaired filters and now helped repair humanity's future. The maintenance worker's journey had become humanity's journey in miniature. The personal transformation reflected the species' potential. The individual growth suggested collective possibility. The living walls pulsed around them. The evaluation was complete. The offer made. Now came the hard part. Going back. Taking what he'd learned. What he'd become. And trying to help his people make the same journey. To help them grow beyond their conflicts. To help them see themselves as he now saw them. As she saw them. As the Nexus saw them. Not as a problem to be solved, but as a possibility to be realized. The living ship turned, its organic walls flexing with the movement. Earth swelled in the viewing membrane, blue and brown and wreathed in cloud. The war was still down there. The fire still burned, but something had changed. The perspective had shifted. Time to go home, the alien woman said. Her voice held no regret, no hesitation, just quiet purpose. The words weren't a conclusion. They were an invitation. The next phase of whatever this was becoming. They prepared to re-enter the atmosphere. The living ship adjusted its configuration, surfaces shifting to handle atmospheric friction. Ethan watched the familiar planet grow larger. The continents took shape. The ocean currents became visible patterns. He could pick out the rough outline of where New Geneva should be. Where the war still raged, the prospect filled him with something he hadn't felt in months. Cautious hope. Not the blind optimism of before the war. Not the despair of during it. Something more realistic, more earned. Humanity had a chance. A real chance. With guidance, with help, with someone who'd seen other species through this transition. The odds were still terrible. The 93% failure rate still loomed. But at least they had a shot. The alien woman moved to stand beside him at the viewing membrane. Her hand brushed his. Not the overwhelming cosmic connection of their first contact. Just contact. Human enough to feel familiar. Alien enough to remind him what was possible. Time to see if your species is ready to become something more than it has been, she said. Her voice was quiet. The words hung between them, simple and profound. The statement held a dual truth about the universe's willingness to offer second chances to those brave enough to take them, and about the way connection across impossible distances could redefine what it meant to belong to each other, to a species, to a galactic community. Earth filled the viewing membrane now, the details resolving into familiar shapes, mountain ranges, coastlines, the thin haze of atmosphere that made life possible. The planet looked fragile from this angle, beautiful and broken, full of potential and problems. The return wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. The real work started now, taking what they'd learned, what they'd become, and trying to make it mean something down there in the dirt and smoke, trying to help his people see what he'd seen, understand what he'd understood. The living ship began its descent. The atmosphere started to glow around them, soft orange light playing across the organic surfaces. The transition was smooth. No shaking, no roar of engines. Just quiet movement through the barrier between space and sky. Ethan kept his eyes on the viewing membrane. On the world growing larger, on the future taking shape below them. The maintenance worker turned ambassador. The alien envoy turned guide. Two very different beings returning to a damaged world with the promise of something better. The possibility of rebirth through partnership, through choices that hadn't been available yesterday but were real today. The ship slipped through the cloud layer. The details of the surface became clear. Ruined cities, burning sectors, but also untouched forests, wide oceans, places the war hadn't reached. The whole complicated mess of humanity spread out below them. Waiting, unknowing. The descent continued. The ship adjusted its course toward what remained of New Geneva, toward the cathedral ruins where this had all begun. The circle closing, the journey ending where it started. But everything different now. Everything changed by what happened in between. By the touch of a hand, the sharing of understanding, the acceptance of an impossible invitation. The descent continued, the ship slipping through cloud layers like a thought through consciousness. Earth filled the viewing membrane, its battered surface coming into sharp focus. The story distilled to its essence in that moment. That sometimes the universe offers second chances to those brave enough to take an impossible journey with a stranger. The line hung in the quiet hum of the living ship. Not as a moral lesson, not as some grand philosophical statement, just a simple truth. The kind that sneaks up on you when you're not looking for it. The kind that changes everything once you see it. Courage, curiosity, and mutual trust could rewrite destinies, even when the odds looked terrible, even when the smart money said failure was inevitable. The 93% statistic didn't have to be destiny. Someone always beats the odds. That's how odds work. The question wasn't whether it was possible. The question was whether you were willing to try. The last image showed Earth growing larger, the details resolving into familiar shapes. The future wasn't written in the stars or decided in some alien courtroom. It was a collective choice waiting to be made down there in the dust and smoke. A choice that would be made with humility or arrogance, with persistence or surrender, with willingness to embrace uncomfortable truths or refusal to see beyond familiar lies. The truth that humans aren't alone in the universe changed everything. Not just the factual reality of other intelligent life, the implications, the responsibility, the understanding that actions have consequences beyond one world, that noise travels in space, that burning your own house down risks setting the whole neighborhood on fire. Rebirth became possible through interstellar partnership. Not rescue, not salvation, partnership. The aliens weren't coming to fix humanity's problems. They were offering tools, knowledge, perspective. The hard work of building something better would still be human work. The choices would still be human choices. The responsibility would still rest on human shoulders. The final cadence suggested a quiet invitation. Not to wait for aliens to save us, not to hope for some deus ex machina from the stars, but to imagine a better world and then build it, to recognize that second chances often come disguised as impossible journeys, as strange hands offered in ruined places, as opportunities that look like risks until you take them. The ship continued its smooth descent. The atmosphere glowed soft orange around them. New Geneva resolved into view below. The cathedral ruins where this began. The circle closing, but everything different now. Everything changed by the journey, by the understanding, by the simple act of taking a stranger's hand when offered. The maintenance worker and the alien envoy, two very different beings returning to a damaged world. Not with all the answers, not with magic solutions, but with something more valuable. A chance to try again, to do better, to build something that might last. The ship settled toward the ground, its living surfaces adjusting to terrestrial conditions. The journey ended where it began, but the real work was just starting. The number hung in the air between them. 93%. It wasn't a judgment, just a fact, a logistical reality, like saying most rain falls downward. Most young species fail the cosmic neighborliness test, the presence in the room conveyed. The message didn't come through sound, but through the shifting light patterns on the walls. They get too excited about having spaceship toys and start breaking things. Ethan looked at the alien woman. She gave a small nod. About 93%, she confirmed. Her voice held no malice, no condescension, just the weary acknowledgement of someone who'd seen this story play out too many times. The number settled in Ethan's stomach like cold stone. 93%. Not most, nearly all. The math was brutal in its simplicity. Out of every 100 civilizations that reached this point, 93 destroyed themselves, or got themselves destroyed. The reasons didn't matter. The result was the same. Failure. Silence. Another empty world spinning through space. He thought about Earth. The burning cities, the weapons that could crack continents, the ease with which humans turned tools into weapons, the way they'd taken flight and invented bombers, discovered radiation and built bombs, created global networks and filled them with hate. They'd looked at the stars and immediately started calculating how to claim them, how to fight over them. The pattern was right there, clear as ancient writing on a cave wall. Humanity wasn't special. They were typical. They were the rule, not the exception. Just another young species with powerful toys and the collective emotional maturity of teenagers who'd discovered fireworks. The number represented centuries of failed civilizations, broken dreams, worlds that might have grown into something beautiful but instead became cautionary tales, silent memorials to ambition without wisdom. The cosmic graveyard was apparently quite crowded, yet here they were. Still talking, still offering this chance. The Nexus hadn't given up on humanity, hadn't written them off as another statistic waiting to happen. They'd reached out, sent an envoy, brought him here. The 93% wasn't a death sentence. It was a challenge, a threshold to be different, to be among the 7%. Ethan looked at the shifting patterns on the walls, at the alien woman who'd risked entering a war zone to make contact. They saw something, some spark, some potential that made them think humanity might be different, might be worth the effort. He thought about what made humans different. Not their technology, not their weapons, their art, their music, their stubborn insistence on creating beauty even in the middle of destruction, their capacity for sudden, unexpected kindness, the medics who treated wounded enemies, the soldiers who shared rations with civilians, the engineers who kept power grids running for hospitals instead of military bases. The 93% saw their toys and started breaking things. Maybe the 7% saw their toys and started building something better. Maybe humanity could be builders instead of breakers. Could be the exception instead of the rule. The weight of the number settled on his shoulders. 93% failure rate. The odds were terrible. The deck was stacked against them. But someone always beats the odds. That's how odds work. Someone has to be in the 7%. Why not humanity? Why not now? He took a breath. The air still tasted like lightning, like possibility. The conversation wasn't over. The evaluation continued, but now he understood what he was arguing against. Not just for humanity's future, but against the weight of history, against the pattern of failure that stretched across the galaxy. Against the 93%. Ethan looked at the shifting patterns on the walls. The attention of the Nexus felt like a physical weight in the room. "We're the galaxy's most inconsistent species," he said. The words came out flat, honest. "We can build hospitals and bombs in the same city, write poetry about peace while planning the next offensive. That's just how we are." The light patterns shifted. A query hung in the air. They wanted evidence, proof that this inconsistency wasn't just chaos, that it could lead somewhere. "Paradox isn't always weakness," Ethan continued. "Sometimes it's how we grow. We learn from our mistakes because we make so many of them." He thought about the medics he'd seen, the ones who treated wounded enemies without checking uniforms first, the civilians who organized food distribution across battle lines, the soldiers who'd started questioning whether creating bigger craters was actually solving anything. The alien woman nodded slowly. "Your species shows paradoxical tendencies," she acknowledged. Her voice held no judgment, just observation. The conversation shifted, became a data exchange. The Nexus presence wanted specifics, not just broad statements. They wanted the contradictions made real through examples. Ethan described the field hospitals where enemy combatants received the same care as friendly troops, the makeshift schools that kept operating in basements while shells fell overhead, the engineers who prioritized power for water purification plants over military installations, small acts, individual choices that ran counter to the larger conflict. "These aren't exceptions," he said. "They're evidence. Proof that even when we're at our worst, we're still capable of better." The patterns on the walls flowed faster. The Nexus was processing, comparing this data against countless other species, other civilizations that had stood where humanity stood now. They recognized that paradox could be an engine for growth, a chaotic, messy, inefficient engine, but one that produced results other species missed. Linear development created stability but sometimes stagnated. Humanity's back-and-forth push-and-pull development might actually be an advantage. The constant tension between destruction and creation forced adaptation, forced innovation. The alien woman watched the exchange. Her presence was a calm center in the swirling data. She'd seen this before. The moment when a species had to articulate its own value, not through technology or power, but through character, through the messy, complicated, contradictory reality of what they were. Ethan felt the weight of the moment. He wasn't just defending humanity. He was defining it, showing that the same species that could burn cities could also rebuild them, that the people who designed weapons could also design systems to clean water and air, that the capacity for harm and the capacity for healing came from the same place, the same restless, curious, complicated human spirit. The evaluation wasn't about proving humanity was perfect. It was about proving they could learn, could grow, could look at their own worst instincts and choose something better, however messy that process might be. The patterns on the wall settled into a slower rhythm. The data exchange continued. Questions, answers, specifics about human behavior under pressure, about capacity for change, about whether inconsistency could be harnessed rather than feared. The conversation became a detailed examination of how species evolve beyond their limitations, how they turn weakness into strength, how paradox becomes progress. The neighborhood metaphor she used wasn't just casual conversation. It revealed how interstellar relations actually function. The cosmic community operates on municipal-level principles refined over millennia. Simple rules for complex coexistence. Noise ordinances prevent cultural contamination between developing species. You don't blast your music when neighbors are sleeping. Similarly, advanced civilizations limit contact with emerging ones to avoid disrupting natural development. No sharing technology that could be weaponized. No revealing secrets that could trigger cultural collapse. The quiet approach allows species to find their own path. Property rights protect planetary systems and resource allocations. You don't pave over someone's garden to build a swimming pool. In cosmic terms, that means respecting territorial boundaries and resource claims. No strip mining inhabited worlds. No diverting stars for energy without consultation. The rules ensure everyone has space to grow. The don't burn neighbors' houses rule prevents cosmic-scale destruction. You don't solve disputes with arson. Translated to interstellar relations, that means no planet-killing weapons, no ecological sabotage, no resource wars that risk entire biospheres. The principal maintains basic safety for everyone in the neighborhood. These guidelines aren't arbitrary restrictions. They evolved from hard experience. Millennia of interspecies contact taught what works and what leads to disaster. The simple metaphor conceals sophisticated diplomatic frameworks developed through trial and error. What sounds like basic courtesy actually represents advanced conflict resolution systems. Humanity's war violated multiple neighborhood guidelines. The weapons being used risked planetary-scale ecological damage. The conflict threatened to spill into space, risking collateral damage to nearby systems. The noise of battle, both literal and metaphorical, disturbed the peaceful development of other species in the sector. By cosmic standards, Earth was being a very problematic neighbor. But the system allows for education before punishment. The first response to rule violations isn't sanctions or intervention. It's outreach, explanation, the chance to learn better ways. The alien's contact with Ethan represented this educational approach. She came offering understanding, not condemnation. This methodology favors growth over punishment. The cosmic community would rather help a species mature than punish them for mistakes. The focus remains on development, not penalty. The goal is bringing new members into the community, not excluding them for early missteps. The neighborhood analogy makes interstellar relations feel familiar. Something humans can understand from their own experience. The complexity gets reduced to basic principles anyone can grasp. Don't make too much noise. Respect property lines. Don't endanger others. Help out when you can. The simplicity is deliberate. Advanced diplomacy often boils down to fundamental courtesies scaled up. The same principles that keep suburban neighborhoods peaceful also keep galactic sectors stable. Just with higher stakes and bigger consequences, humanity stood at the threshold of understanding this. The war represented failure to grasp basic cosmic etiquette, but the offer of guidance showed the system's flexibility, the willingness to teach rather than punish, to explain rather than condemn. The alien's presence itself demonstrated the neighborhood approach. She came as a concerned neighbor offering help, not an authority figure delivering judgment. The method focused on building understanding rather than enforcing compliance. The rules protect everyone while allowing for growth. They create a framework where diverse species can coexist without constant conflict, where development happens naturally but safely, where the neighborhood remains livable for all its residents, old and new. Humanity's evaluation would determine whether they could learn these rules, whether they could become good neighbors in a very large, very old community. The stakes were nothing less than Earth's place in the cosmic neighborhood. Her touch wasn't what it seemed. The hand contact in the cathedral ruins was biological technology advanced far beyond human capabilities. Their nervous systems could interface directly, skin to skin, allowing them to share information through physical contact. This wasn't magic, just advanced biological engineering combined with technological enhancement. The surge Ethan felt was literal data transfer at the cellular level. An information feed directly into his nervous system. His neurons lit up with cosmic understanding, as data streams integrated into his own biology. The stars being born and dying in his mind weren't just images. They were information packets, knowledge transmitted through biochemistry rather than language. The sensations felt like cosmic revelation, but the mechanism was purely scientific. This communication method made deception almost impossible between connected beings. You could lie with words, you could fake facial expressions, but skin-to-skin contact revealed truth directly through biochemical signals and neural patterns. The process bypassed conscious control and went straight to underlying reality. The honesty came from biological truth-telling mechanisms that couldn't be faked. Humanity's reliance on verbal communication seemed primitive by contrast. All that talking, all those carefully chosen words and practiced expressions. The aliens people viewed it like watching someone communicate with smoke signals while standing next to a quantum comm system. The inefficiency was almost painful to contemplate, yet they found value in human verbal creativity. The way humans use language to create poetry and stories, the art of conversation and debate. The alien acknowledged this difference held potential. Her people's direct neural communication was efficient and honest, but perhaps lacked the creative spark of human linguistic invention. The imperfection of words allowed for art that perfect understanding might miss. The biological connection served multiple purposes. It was a tool for honest communication, a cultural bridge between species. A way to share understanding that went beyond language barriers. The technology allowed for immediate, deep connection that would normally take years to build through conventional means. Ethan realized this explained her calm confidence during their first meeting. She wasn't taking a risk reaching out to a strange human. The touch would tell her everything she needed to know about him instantly. His character, his intentions, his capacity for understanding. The evaluation began the moment their hands met. The conversation that followed was just confirmation. The system had safeguards. The initial contact was carefully modulated to avoid overwhelming human neurology. The data transfer rate was controlled to prevent neural damage. The technology represented centuries of refinement and ethical consideration. This wasn't some crude mind-reading trick. It was sophisticated interspecies communication, refined through long experience. Humanity had similar capabilities in primitive form. The way mothers and infants communicated through touch, the subconscious reading of micro-expressions and body language, the gut feelings about people's honesty. The alien technology took these basic human abilities and amplified them through biological engineering. The foundation was familiar, just vastly more developed. The connection became their primary communication method as they traveled. Words were still used, but increasingly as supplements to the deeper understanding transmitted through occasional brief contact. A hand on the shoulder could convey more than hours of conversation. A simple touch could share complex concepts that would take paragraphs to explain verbally. The technology raised questions about human development. What if humanity had evolved this capability? How would history have been different if leaders couldn't lie to their people through touch? If agreements were sealed with handshakes that verified honesty? The potential for different social structures was fascinating to consider. The biological interface represented both opportunity and challenge for future human-alien relations. The honesty it enforced could prevent misunderstandings, but it also required vulnerability that humans found uncomfortable. The willingness to be truly known, without filters or defenses. That was the real barrier to crossing, not the technology itself. The alien woman watched Ethan process these implications. Her calm demeanor suggested she'd been through this before with other species. The adjustment to such intimate communication was always challenging, but also transformative. The technology didn't just allow communication, it fundamentally changed how beings related to each other. The ship wasn't built. It was grown. That's the first thing Ethan noticed once the initial shock wore off. Where human technology involved factories and assembly lines, this craft felt cultivated, nurtured. The walls had the warm resilience of living tissue, not the cold hardness of metal alloys. Human engineering fought against nature, forced materials to behave in ways they weren't meant to, pounded metal into shapes, melted minerals into components. The alien approach worked with natural systems instead of against them. Their technology grew organically, developing capabilities through biological processes rather than mechanical force. The living panels shifted as they moved through the ship, not like machinery operating, but like muscles flexing. The surfaces responded to their presence, adjusting temperature and texture to accommodate them. When Ethan sat, what he thought was a chair conformed to his body like a loyal animal making space for its owner. The cushion didn't just hold his weight, it cradled him, supported him, responded to his shifting position with subtle adjustments. Their acceleration defied everything Ethan knew about physics. No crushing G-forces, no roaring engines. The ship simply moved and they moved with it. The alien explained they shared a nervous system with the vessel. She wasn't operating controls so much as directing intention. The ship responded to her biochemistry, her neural patterns. It was less like driving a vehicle and more like asking a trusted companion for assistance. This represented a complete paradigm shift in technological philosophy. Human technology created separation between user and tool. You operated a machine. You maintained it. You replaced parts when they wore out. The alien approach created partnership. The ship wasn't a tool, it was a companion. A living system that evolved alongside its users. The implications were staggering. Human technology became obsolete as newer models emerged, required constant updates and replacements. This living technology adapted, learned, grew more capable with time and experience. It didn't become outdated, it matured. Ethan thought about human industrial methods. The waste, the pollution, The constant consumption of resources to build and rebuild. The alien approach seemed inherently sustainable. Their technology didn't consume resources, it integrated with natural systems, worked in harmony with biological processes rather than dominating them. The living ship demonstrated responsive design at its most advanced. Every surface, every system adjusted to meet their needs. Environmental controls maintained perfect conditions without visible mechanisms. Navigation happened through what felt like mutual understanding, rather than computed coordinates. This biotechnology prioritized synergy over superiority. Where human technology sought to conquer natural limitations, alien technology sought to understand and work within them. The result was systems that felt less like machines and more like extensions of their users, partnerships rather than tools. The difference became clear in how they traveled. Human spaceflight involved brutal forces harnessed through sheer power, rockets fighting gravity, engines pushing against resistance. The alien ship moved like it was part of the fabric of space itself. Not fighting natural laws, but working with them in ways humans hadn't imagined possible. Ethan realized this living technology paradigm offered more than just advanced transportation. It suggested a different relationship with the universe itself, one based on cooperation rather than conquest, understanding rather than domination. The ship wasn't just taking them somewhere, it was demonstrating a better way to exist in reality. The maintenance worker in him marveled at the elegance. No spare parts needed, no maintenance schedules. The ship maintained itself, healed itself, adapted to changing conditions. Human technology required constant intervention to keep functioning. This technology simply functioned, grew, evolved. The living cushion adjusted to his shifting weight as the ship changed course. The walls pulsed with soft light that seemed to respond to their conversation. Everything felt connected, integrated. A complete system working in harmony rather than a collection of parts fighting for dominance. The paradigm shift wasn't just about better technology, it was about better thinking. The city had been everything. The war had been everything. Then the planet became a marble, a blue and white swirl hanging in the black. The shift wasn't just visual, it was psychological. The problems that felt world-ending now looked like small decorative patterns. The perspective changed everything. Ethan had spent months measuring his life in meters of gained territory, in ammunition counts and rations. The view from orbit made that thinking feel small, provincial. The distance granted wasn't just physical, it was emotional, moral. The burning sectors were just flickers, the battle lines just scratches on a surface. The alien watched him process the view. She understood what was happening. The cognitive restructuring. The way altitude forced a different kind of thinking. Her people valued long-term cosmic harmony. The big picture, the slow dance of civilizations across millennia. Humanity's war represented a failure of perspective, an inability to see beyond immediate conflicts. The cosmic view revealed connections human vision missed. How actions on one continent affected weather patterns on another. How resource extraction in one region destabilized economies elsewhere. The war wasn't an isolated event. It sent ripples through systems humans barely understood. The galactic neighborhood felt the vibrations. This perspective shift was necessary for species maturity. You couldn't become a cosmic citizen while thinking like a territorial animal. The orbital view was the first lesson in a much larger education. The understanding that your world is part of something, that your actions have consequences beyond your atmosphere. Ethan realized humanity needed to develop this perspective emotionally, not just intellectually. The knowledge that Earth was a planet among planets wasn't enough. The feeling was what mattered. The gut-level understanding that came from seeing your home as a fragile object in a vast system. That changed how you thought, how you acted. The alien perspective made human conflict seem like children fighting over toys. Important to the children, sure, but not actually important. The real issues were larger, slower, more fundamental. The health of planetary systems, the stability of solar neighbors, the careful balance of a galaxy that had to house countless species. Humanity had been playing checkers while the universe was playing chess. The war was a move on a tiny board. The real game involved orbital mechanics and atmospheric chemistry, and the slow, careful cultivation of intelligent life. The stakes were higher than which army controlled which city. The view from the ship's membrane became a meditation. Ethan watched the Terminator line sweep across the planet. Daylight and darkness moving over continents, the patterns of weather systems, the slow dance of ocean currents, everything connected, everything affecting everything else. The war was just a temporary disturbance in much larger systems. This was the education humanity needed. Not better weapons, not stronger walls, a better perspective. The understanding that survival meant thinking bigger, thinking longer, considering consequences beyond the next battle or the next election cycle, seeing the world as one system among many. The maintenance worker from New Geneva was learning to think like a cosmic citizen. The transformation felt uncomfortable, like outgrowing clothes that had fit for years. The old ways of thinking felt tight, restrictive. The new perspective was unsettling but necessary. The ship continued its orbit. The planet turned below them. The war continued its small, destructive patterns, but Ethan saw it differently now, not as the center of everything, just as one problem among many, one challenge to be solved as part of a much larger project, the project of becoming a species that could live in a neighborhood without burning it down. Humanity's inconsistency wasn't a flaw in the evaluation. It became their strongest argument. Where other species developed in straight lines, predictable growth patterns following logical progressions, humans were different. Their paradoxical nature allowed for creative problem-solving that linear thinkers missed. The same species that created genocide also created hospitals. The people who designed weapons also designed systems to clean water and air. This capacity for both destruction and creation enabled adaptive resilience that more perfect civilizations lacked. When one approach failed, humans could pivot to its complete opposite. That flexibility became their advantage. The judges recognized that perfection often led to fragility in species development. Civilizations that grew too logically, too predictably, often couldn't handle unexpected challenges. They broke under pressure. Humanity's messy development created cultural elasticity. The constant tension between opposing forces drove innovation that comfortable stability never could. Humanity's struggle between war and compassion wasn't weakness. It represented active growth. The internal conflict forced constant reassessment, continual adaptation. Other species reached plateaus where development stalled. Humanity's contradictions kept them moving, kept them questioning, kept them evolving. This messy, inconsistent path might actually yield stronger cosmic citizens. The judges saw that species that never faced internal struggle often lacked empathy for others. They couldn't understand conflict because they'd never experienced it. Humanity's turbulent history gave them insight into the challenges other developing species might face. The very flaws humanity saw in themselves became strengths from the cosmic perspective. Their inability to maintain consistent progress became creative flexibility. Their capacity for violence became understanding of conflict resolution. Their messy emotional complexity became empathy for other struggling species. Where other civilizations developed Danyi de Wenhua, or unified worldviews, humanity maintained countless competing perspectives. This diversity of thought prevented the cultural stagnation that doomed other species. No single ideology could dominate completely. The constant tension between different approaches forced continual reevaluation and growth. The judges noted that humanity's scientific progress often came from unlikely connections. Artists influencing engineers, poets inspiring physicists. This cross-pollination of disciplines created innovation that more specialized species missed. Their inconsistency became a breeding ground for unexpected breakthroughs. Humanity's emotional volatility, something they often saw as weakness, actually provided motivational energy that more placid species lacked. Their passions drove them to create great art and undertake grand projects. Their anger at injustice fueled social progress. Their capacity for both deep love and profound hate created the energy for massive cultural shifts. The evaluation shifted from looking for perfection to recognizing potential. The paradox itself became the point, not whether humanity was good or bad, but whether they could harness their contradictions productively. Whether the tension between their best and worst impulses could drive them forward rather than tear them apart. The maintenance worker turned advocate understood this intuitively. His own journey from hiding in ruins to speaking for his species reflected the paradox. Fear and courage existing simultaneously. Insecurity and confidence sharing space. The very inconsistencies that made humanity dangerous also made them interesting, potentially valuable, possibly exceptional. The conversation became less about meeting standards and more about demonstrating capacity. Not whether humanity was perfect now, but whether they could keep growing, keep learning, keep balancing their contradictory nature in ways that served progress rather than destruction. The evaluation focused on trajectory rather than current state. The hand touch in the cathedral ruins became the pivot point. Not a treaty signing or a grand speech, just skin meeting skin. A single moment of contact that redirected humanity's entire trajectory toward the cosmic community. The simplicity of it was almost embarrassing. History-changing moments were supposed to involve more ceremony. This demonstrated how small actions create massive systemic change. The aliens' decision to reach out wasn't random. It was a calculated risk based on observation. She'd been watching, studying, noting patterns human intelligence agencies missed, the moments of compassion amid the violence, the medics treating enemy wounded, the engineers prioritizing civilian infrastructure over military targets. She saw something in humanity worth the risk, despite the overwhelming evidence of their capacity for destruction. Ethan's willingness to accept the touch showed something equally important. Human capacity for trust in impossible circumstances. He was hiding from a war, surrounded by evidence that contact usually meant danger. Yet when this impossible being reached out her hand, he took it. That simple act of trust became as significant as her act of reaching out. This mutual risk-taking created the foundation for everything that followed. The alien risking exposure to a violent species, the human risking contact with an unknown entity, both acting against their better judgment because something felt different this time. The hand touch became the first brick in a bridge between worlds. It became symbolic of openness to new possibilities. The willingness to reach across divides, to make contact instead of raising barriers. The gesture challenged humanity's deepest fears about the unknown and different. It suggested that first contact didn't require perfect circumstances or grand gestures, just one being willing to extend a hand and another willing to take it. The moment demonstrated that transformation often begins quietly, not with explosions or announcements, but with quiet choices made in ruined places. The alien choosing to reveal herself, the human choosing to trust. Two very different beings finding common ground in a gesture so simple, children use it every day. That hand touch contained all the complexity of interspecies relations in its simplicity. The fear, the hope, the risk, the potential. It was a question and an answer happening simultaneously, an offer and an acceptance, a beginning and an ending. The old world of isolation ending, the new world of connection beginning. The historical significance only became clear later. Looking back from the living ship, from the nexus, from the perspective of orbital altitude, what seemed like a desperate moment in a ruined building became the turning point, the hinge on which humanity's future swung. The alien's hand wasn't special. Just a hand. Ethan's hand wasn't special. Just a hand. But together they became something more. A connection that spanned species, that crossed light years of cultural development, that bridged technological gaps, all contained in that simple, quiet moment of contact. The touch changed history because it changed perspective. It showed that advanced civilizations weren't about superior weapons or technology. They were about superior understanding, better ways of connecting, more honest ways of communicating. The hand touch demonstrated that the distance between species wasn't as great as humanity feared. The differences were surmountable. The gaps were bridgeable. History would record it as first contact. But it felt more like meeting a neighbor you didn't know you had. The hand touch didn't feel like diplomacy. It felt like introduction, like the beginning of a conversation that might last centuries. The simple human act of reaching out and making contact scaled up to cosmic proportions. The universe offers second chances to those brave enough to take impossible journeys with strangers. Earth's future now rests on simple choices: growth over destruction, connection over isolation. The aliens' people have watched civilizations rise and fall, knowing that survival hinges on choosing evolution. Sometimes all it takes is one touch to redirect history, one moment of trust to alter everything. The maintenance worker and the envoy return not with solutions, but with a choice, a chance to become something more. The hand that reached out in the ruins still waits. The invitation remains open.